And in that she talks about how marriage has been institutionalized, but if it doesn't work, fine, you break it up, and then you have your own ways or mechanisms designed to meet the challenges. Now, not having a proper institution of divorce has a very serious impact, especially on children, because to meet the damages, if you would like to call, of a family that's not stable together, we've designed ways of collecting child supports, mostly from the fathers, but yes, mothers, if they're making that kind of money. And the idea is the child at least gets the financial support if the family has not stayed together. But no amount of child support or financial support can ever substitute for the missing parent, whether it's a father or a mother, because that cannot come up with the entire institutional support of motherhood or fatherhood that child is missing. And I take it as a very serious note, and I think more family sociologists could look into it. Now, my methodology was, I am a qualitative sociologist, so I collected a data of about 90 family histories, and out of which 24 turned out to be ethnic families. So those were the families I presented last year when I talked about stability and change among post-1995 immigrants in the United States. So this 76 families are those who have known immigration in their immediate family and have been a part of American mainstream for a very long time. So this is the question that I pose to them. Describe your experiences and memories about your immediate family, including your parents and your sibling, and your extended family, including your grandparents, uncles, and aunts on both your mother's and father's sides. Try to include as many details as you can about marriages, births, deaths, divorces, religious and ethnic affiliations, education, and employment. Also include a description of the macro concept you can recall in terms of what was going on in the society around the time frame in which you are describing your family. Because there's one more thing implied in this question, and that is, I was interested in the details of the families, but we cannot ignore what's going on around us as a family in that given time. Because economic downturns, wars, recessions, all these things have a very direct correlation with that micro family dynamics in each home. Now, how do we define family? Because I'm sure everybody knows the definition of it, but the reason I am trying to get to the definition is it's becoming more and more broad, and it includes a lot more newer trends that in fact substitute for family. Substitute in parentheses. Now, are we going to call that a family? Because if I was teaching a course in family 40 years ago, any such thing could be easily categorized as a non-family arrangement and left there. But the growing trend makes me rethink, how do I define family? So for my basic definition, I use socialization of children and tension management as a very important feature that we look for in a family. Well, some of my students have stories that they have shared with me, and it looks like families have become the cause of tension, not managing tension. So that's a different story. But that is the basic sociological ingredient that you're looking for. Now, I also tell them that it's a zone of no competition. So you accept your parents, your children, your sibling as they are, not in terms of better or worse or what they bring to, because it's something that's given to you. It's an ascribed status. Now, as I was browsing through many more definitions of it, Squamber and Warner's 2004 definition caught my attention, in which they say relationships of blood, marriage, and affection that has economic cooperation along with an identity in which they are intimately connected to each other and to the larger society. I don't know, if I have the option, I would include adoption as well, which is not there. Now, relationships of blood, marriage, or affection can be meaningful if you have that functionality, stability, consistency, and continuity. If you have all this, but none of the four, then it's a matter of, yes, it did happen. It happens that we are related, or it happens that we are married, but none of those four cornerstones are being fulfilled. Now, I also question myself as to how far is the concept restricted to the legally sanctioned heterosexual couples who procreate. Now, where is this coming from? Because all of you are aware that there is a growing trend of cohabitation and same-sex couples. And an argument often comes up. It's better to have two same-sex parents who love the child than to have two heterosexual parents who are abusive and brought this child into the world. Or there's always an argument, two people who love each other do not need to make that legal commitment. That in itself is a bigger commitment. Now, I am neither for any of these nor against any of these, but you know, I am testing them against those four cornerstones of functionality, stability, continuity, and consistency. If they can pass through that test, I'm all for them. But if they can't, then I would like ourselves to be conscious of the fact that this would make a permanent impact on a future citizen. Well, this is a very responsible decision that we are making. Now, well, I discussed stability, functionality, consistency, and continuity. Now, everything has a reference point, and so does the institution of family. We still have that ideal model, which is slowly and gradually fading, of a breadwinning dad and a homemaking mom and two kids. And when I say two kids, my students add spice to it. They say, yeah, one boy and one girl. I wish we could be that perfect. And a dog, of course, and a white picket fence. Now, that is our ideal. The golden era of families, the 50s. But still, I would like to make you sensitive to the fact that this was for the majority. There was a 12% minority for whom the golden era of families began after the civil rights movement. You know whom I'm referring to, African Americans. They had their era started a little later. Now, when that is the ideal model, and yes, we were very successful in maintaining functionality, stability, continuity, and consistency, then what are the current challenges to that model? Well, here are some of them. We live in a post-modern, post-industrial society that has a very fast pace. Well, relationships cannot be created, maintained, and sustained at that pace. Relationships need time. And that time we are always pressured against. Now, the work environment, if you compare to the 50s and now, you know the difference. At that time, it was a whole different world as compared to today, where we are in an economic transition from the production to service economy. Well, globalization has added its own pressures to the economy, leading to a kind of downturn. And all this has a toll on an institution that you think is yours and would always be there, that is family. And then the changing gender roles. Gender roles have come a long way, and they have changed in a way that it has a serious impact when it comes to the institution of motherhood and fatherhood. And yes, of course, people are living longer. Normal calculation was you retire at 65, maybe 10 more years, and that's it. Now people retire at 65, and a lot of them live around 90 years of age. So it's a good 25 to 30 years, and institution has to take care of all those things that come with an old age as well. Now, here are some of the consequences. There is a high rate of cohabitation, divorce, binuclear families, and blended families, and an increased involvement of grandparents. Well, longevity adds value, and that is the grandparents can be there for their grandchildren if need be. Blended families, well, when the idea of Brady Bunch was first introduced, well, it was a very, attractive idea. We would watch that show, but it has its own downturns as well. Blended family is better than no family. But if you hear from the side of a kid, he's like, I have to be in these two adults' custody and control, who are my parents, and just because they cannot get along, one walks away with me and puts me through the custody and control, and of course change socialization practices as my new parent, or who could be a father or a mother. Okay, I'll adjust to that, but I'm not sure if this is a final adjustment. And reading the data, it looks that normally kids have been through 2 to 3 sets of relationships of their parents. So it does add a lot of adjustment challenge to a kid who could be anywhere between birth to 18 years. And my 4 parameters that I'm looking for, they wobble. Now, cohabitation, if that's what the postmodern, post-industrial society needs to adjust for, well, let's not have a problem. Let's not judge that as we used to in the past, but let's make sure that it passes through our test for stability, functionality, consistency, and the form. Consistency, continuity, stability, and functionality. Now, divorce is, I use a weird way of explaining that sometimes the divorce could be a necessary evil. Those two people who decided to live their lives together were not made for each other, and maybe they have to separate, and that's a better option than living in a relationship that's not working out. But children go through the impact of divorce for a decision they did not make. For the 2 divorcing adults, they are walking apart. They were husband and wife. But for that child, it was a mother and a father. And that cannot be replaced. A husband might remarry, or a wife might remarry, but this child is caught up in between the quagmire of relationships. Next thing, it appears, is a declining institution of fatherhood. Well, why I'm not saying a declining institution of motherhood? Well, there might be some decline, but the way mother-child relationship goes, 9 times out of 10, children end up with their mothers. However, the quality of motherhood might go down when she's trying to do dual parenting and be, worried about making that money to run the household. It has been observed that traditional marriages had a lot of pampering for men to feel great about being fathers. Now, this is coming from a female presenter. Gentlemen, please don't get me wrong. There's a certain way male psyche works as compared to a certain way female psyche works. So when we try to portray independence in a way that men take it as, oh, I have nothing more to offer. Because if you look at those golden years of our family life, men took great pride in being good providers. In fact, rest of it was the homemaker's job. When they were great providers, they were highly respected and regarded for it. Coming from that era, women's independence, economic independence especially, has come to hit that male pride. Maybe the new generation of males need to be socialized in a way that they're not just looking for that money they can bring in to the family to feel involved. They do a lot more things than just bringing in that paycheck. But this has to be instilled in a socialization of the 21st century for boys. Now, high single parenting, we just talked about it, and there is, of course, a challenge to the four cornerstones of the family. Now, here are some of the findings. The way those family histories have been reported, I'm trying to read them line by line and also get a feel for what's there between the lines. So it appears that a lot of people enter the institution of marriage without commitment. Now, we're moving from one extreme to the other. The first extreme was walking out of a marriage was shameful. No matter how bad it is, you live into it and make it successful. Now, we're at the other extreme where people enter a marriage without a serious commitment. And you know how easy it is to marry. There are some prerequisites for a driver's license. Sorry, we have none for a marriage license. Anybody who considers himself an adult can go down and get himself registered and then get married. Well, it's our freedom to get married, but freedom does not come without responsibilities. So that lack of commitment is, oh, you can start a marriage. If it doesn't work, you can always walk out. Well, you do not walk out scar-free for yourself. And of course, if there is a child involved, it will be a permanent impact. Now, this whole idea about individual self. See, America has always been all about individuality, but there was a limit to that because we did have very strong family values. And we consider our society as a pronatalist society that cares for its children. So maybe there's another swing which is getting very self-centered. So the idea of love and affection has switched itself in a direction where it takes into consideration self. And in a social living, you're never by yourself. You are independent, but there's a lot of interdependence involved which we ignore. Now, the sense of abandonment. There were a couple family histories that said the father left the home without any discussion, fight, or anything. Like the kid was like surprised. He doesn't come home today, and he's like, maybe something happened. They look for him, they wait for weeks and then months, and finally resolve in their mind that he has left. What kind of impact do you have when you have a consistent relationship with a child as a father, and then you walk out? And most of the times, it has been reported that economic insecurity. He lost a job, he was depressed, he tried to find new jobs. The stories are around economic insecurity. Now, infidelity and adultery is one of the major causes of instability in marriages. As we grow postmodern, we interact with a lot more people than we used to when this institution was put in place. Now, what should be our limits of interaction? I'm not here to tell you, but this limitless interaction in ways that are harmful to the family has damaged this institution a lot. And then we have destigmatized most of the things, saying it's individuals' freedom. Well, now financial insecurity, as I said, is one of the major reasons, especially now and in the blue-collar jobs that have been laid off. They have no money, no health care, and then there is an added fear of retirement, sending children to college. All that put together is taking a toll on the stability of these institutions. You all know the divorce rate has risen. This is a strange recession. Each time our society has seen a recession, the divorce rate goes up. But in this recession, it's interesting how some studies are pointing out at people are holding to get divorced. So it's not that they're not planning to get divorced, but this is not the right time. So that limbo causes many more problems for children in that relationship. Yes, of course, addiction plays a very important role. It's both parents. It could be a mom or a dad, not just one gender. And drug, alcohol, and gambling have taken control over the lives of these families. A lot of those 76 families have incidents of domestic violence of these multiple kinds: physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual. And one of the reasons that I understood from reading that for addiction and domestic violence is the insecurity, the depression, the mental torture these people are going through because of financial insecurity. Well, so based on what I have presented, these are some of the broad conclusions I'm drawing for now, but I would upgrade them towards my, when I reach the final stage of my research. I think family is an institution from the agricultural era, and by all means it needs an update. What are those? We will have to kind of think about them in terms of maintaining individual freedom and providing stability and consistency for the newer generation. Now, in order to maintain functionality and stability, we need to institutionalize divorce and prevent the fatherhood institution from diminishing. We need to see the impact of divorce beyond that breakup, because marriage is never reversed. You can take a divorce, but the impacts are always there. And if you have children, well, those are the more longer lasting impacts that you would see in the next generation. How do you keep or maintain fatherhood as a functional, important institution? For my family course this semester, I'm using a book by David Blankenhorn, and the book is entitled
fatherless America.
Fatherless America. So he has different categories of fathers that he has studied. But by all means, his conclusion is fatherhood is a very important institution to nurture, raise, provide, and guide the younger generation, and nothing can replace it. And from his perspective, it appears that society is trying to adjust to what it cannot repair. And that's like we're trying to find alternatives to fatherhood, but there is no alternative to that institution. I wish the younger generation of fathers realize how important it is for them to be in that mentoring role, that they can leave behind a progeny that has an impression of them as a human being, which is far more than bringing home that paycheck. Well, family as an institution is dysfunctional and unstable without a complementary input from both motherhood and fatherhood. So these are, if you want to call, if family is an institution, these are the two pillars of that institution, and if they are not properly placed, the institution wobbles. So when in an era of diminishing fatherhoods, the institution of motherhood is overstrained. So I don't think they're doing a proper job, which their role entails, because they also have to fill in for another role, that is to take a job and be a provider. Now, court-ordered child support, maybe court-ordered time. This is a way that we have worked out to fill in the gap that these children are missing, but in no way a child gets a full learning experience from a father, from these, bits and pieces of financial support or the court-ordered timings. Well, that's all for today. If you have any questions, thank you all for coming.
Yeah, you appear to use institution very widely. The family institution, motherhood, fatherhood institutions, maybe marriage as an institution. So are you emphasizing stability as the one of your 5 or 6 terms, continuity and so on? You seem to be emphasizing stability no matter what is stable, whether it's motherhood or fatherhood, whether it's family, whether it's marriage or whatever.
You're right. Stability is my prime focus. And you said whether it's marriage or whatever. I am not defining that. The social trends are defining for themselves that marriage cannot be the only institution where children get their emotional support. So, the way we've adjusted always in our society, growing trends of something make it acceptable. So, can I use the concept of institution for cohabitation? Maybe not. But do you see the statistics? Well, there is a pretty high statistics of it. So, in a way, I'm caught up in the transition as to how I define what's an institution and what's not. Because the basic sociological definition of institution is accepted, standardized ways of accomplishing goals. We have tolerated cohabitation. I don't know if we have really reached accepting it. And by no means we say it's a standardized way of having a family, because you have this image of host family. Can you imagine a president of our society having this kind of a family? Oh no, for sure, no. But do you see the number of families that are like this? So I'm not able to take a firm position on either or, but the statistics have caught my attention and I'm in the middle of defining it. So I haven't reached anywhere. And yes, of course, if stability is something cohabitation can give, maybe not me, but in years to come, that would assume a status of an institution. By the way, since you brought that up, once I was driving and I heard NPR and they said, divorce rate in Michigan is falling. I'm like, really? Then they go about and say, fewer and fewer people are getting married. So more of them are living in cohabitational relationships. So it's a very confusing statistics if I go by that and say, oh yeah, there's a decline in divorce. Well, there's a decline in marriage as well.
I didn't hear what the name of that book by David Blankenhorn was.
It's called The Fatherless America.
Fathers.
That's why I believe we have the pendulum effect. We went from patriarchal family all the way to free-for-all family, free-for-all marriage, from private family to public domain. As if we look today, the effect, the consequences of this society is bearing the blunt of dysfunctional families. We can see that in children who commit massacres, who commit. So my question is, can we hold parents responsible even if the parents are out of the picture? Can we still legally hold them responsible? Or is it just a public responsibility now?
Well, pendulum effect has always been a part of social dynamics, not just for family, but for many more things. Now, holding parents responsible for the mistakes children make. It depends on the kind of involvement and responsibility we are expecting. But what's going on, we would have less of a control in blaming parents. Now, like you said, the pendulum effect from one extreme to the other, Blankenhorn has a very interesting chapter which he calls the old father. Now, please, by no means, don't get me wrong that the old father was a perfect father. Because the old father was very controlling, and he had this whole gender hierarchy in his mind, and women were never as good as himself or his sons, so his wife and daughters came secondary. He had no emotional appeal to the whole relationships and family dynamics per se. If he was a man and he wears the pants, then he really needs to be stiff, right? So yes, that wasn't a very responsible way of raising children where they learn their roles. So, and today, who raises our child? Did you basically look into the dynamics of childcare? TV has so much of an impact. The environment has so much of an impact. In fact, parenting as a role today has become a very competitive role. You have to compete against all these agents of socialization to make it to the mind of your child. And of course, what you're saying is dry, is more work, and children are attracted to this. So there is always a competition, and that's what makes a parent's role tougher. Because no matter what the competition is, if your children fall short of learning the dues of the society, then you are going to be responsible as a parent. Yes.
I just had a question. I was wondering if we did institutionalize divorce, would that increase cohabitation? I mean, the fear of not being able to divorce so easily would appear that it would prevent people from getting married.
Well, institutionalization does not mean making divorce difficult, because the solution to the problem of fatherlessness is not making divorce difficult. You know, if you make it difficult, maybe he's not going away from the family, but making it a hell of an experience for the kids to be raised in that. Now, there has to be an action plan after divorce that can be consistently applied for the children to get their share in parents' time, money, guidance, and nurturance. So by no means institutionalization of divorce is making divorce difficult. No.
I had a question about the data collection. So my question is, when you ask the open-ended question, like how long did people tend to talk for explaining their histories?
In fact, they did not talk. They
Oh,
did
okay.
a 10-page paper
Oh, I see.
because I wasn't there in any way to disturb. My presence wasn't there, and they were completely anonymous. So after I collected, I assigned a number to that.
Okay.
So they had about 8 weeks, and they wrote whatever they felt like in response to that question in their time over that 8-week span.
Oh,
Yes, go ahead.
I guess I have a question about the definition that you're using of family as an institution. You're actually talking about the old definition of family as being dysfunctional and unstable, not what is just transitioning the definition of family as how most people define it today, as being this effective type family structure rather than the way that is traditionally defined by, blood or by legal definition. And that this effective type of family definition meaning more than just legal bonds. And so I guess I have a question about using the term dysfunctional and unstable and trying to make a distinction between the fact that you're talking about this old type of family definition rather than how you're saying family is transitioning today.
I'm sorry if I came across that way. I in no way claim that the traditional family was functional, 100%. See, no institution put in place that's man-made is ever going to be perfect because societies outgrow institutions. So this whole argument was in the outgrowing of that institution from our manufacturing era to the service era, if you would like to put it that way. Now, these newer definitions of affection, love, care, and nurturance, which could come from cohabitation or same-sex couples, do not qualify from the traditional parameters to be a family arrangement. They would leave it there as some non-family arrangement. I can't because of the number of families being revolving around that. So I haven't yet given them a term, but I would like to include them as families if they could provide the next generation with the 4 parameters that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning that, if that's what you were doing, I'm just saying that.
Do I call it a family or not? I don't have a problem calling the new arrangement. In fact, I'm saying that family is a very traditional institution and we need an upgrading of that definition. Let's include something more if it meets those 4 parameters. Did you have a question?
Yeah, about the sampling, how was this sampling done? I mean, how did you choose these 6 families? Randomly or proportionately?
Actually, this was an assignment for my undergraduate students. I have been teaching now, for a quarter century and have families several times. So I would give this assignments many times and learn about what was going on in the family until I finally made a decision that I need to study it sociologically. And then I went through HIC approval and everything. So this was done, in January to March of 2010, and it was a group of 120 undergraduate students who opted for this assignment. There were a ton of others written assignments, out of which 90 family histories met all I was looking for as a requirement for the study. Yes.
My question is concerning your research in regards to family. You state that because family is transitioning from agriculture to industrial to this modern day family, and because this modern day family is changing, it's also made the gender roles alter as well. And because of gender roles now altering, where the woman may be the breadwinner in the family, have you noticed a decline in women's health?
Decline in women's health. Well, being a woman has become a more stressful role. I haven't made a study of decline in women's health per se, but one of our students from the department had a presentation on hurried woman syndrome. So if you look into that traditional mindset of a mother of 4 kids, her territory was running this home as effectively as she could, and that's it. Well, today's woman has something beyond that. And in fact, there is a perfect solution, but we are not looking for that. Send all these women home, make them take care of the babies, and the society would be free of these pressures. But no, we cannot deny that by bringing women to the labor market, we have doubled our labor force. And that society owes a very large chunk of its prosperity to these women. So family sociologists tear apart all the impact, but they wouldn't like women to go back because there would be a very direct impact on the society. However, there could be some impact on women's health. I haven't studied that.
Many years ago, Znaniecki, Polish sociologist, said that in the West, in the U.S. and in the West, the family which we think of, the conjugal relationship, the wife, husband, and children, is really a small group because it does not include the consanguine relationship, it does not include the kinship and so on. So, in much of the world, the family, of course, includes the consanguine relationship. So, in the U.S. and in the West, the family should be seen as a group, but an institutionalized group. So, he was trying to solve the problem of the consanguine conjugal distinction, which is often ignored by people living in industrial societies, by sociologists.